Hello, everyone. Earlier this week, I have been meeting with some students regarding their research topics and their assignments and been looking through some drafts already, which is fantastic. And one of the questions that I received yesterday in a meeting was, what can I do to make sure that I can get the highest grade I can on this? What sorts of things are you actually looking for? And in the abstract guidelines on Canvas, that has all this information just kind of shoved here for you. When you go to the bottom, there's a rubric, and I do need to update it because this is not points, it's percentage. This is like the percentage of whatever the points are for the assignment, which is pretty high. It's like 30% of the grade almost, right? So the percentage that is put to certain things is important to this. So when we look at the bibliography or the in your case an abstract rubric, they're all the same really. Is it starts with a layout, and this is just needed no matter what you do, right? Name, date, topic. You've got minimum of 3 citations supporting text, and supporting text, and it should be done in like 12-point font as opposed to say 18 or 20 or something like that. And Arial is fine or similar. Yeah, I'm not really going to be looking that closely at it, but something like that's really not kind of standard in the academic biz. Let's see. As we go forward, then we get the topic. Yeah, it was where the percentage points really start to make a role here. Topic. Do you have a clearly identified idea that is narrow in scope enough so that delving into the topic with depth is possible? That means, for instance, instead of covering the history of slavery in the United States or in the world, over hundreds of years, which you can never do in something that's 2 or 3 or 4 pages. It's just not possible, and therefore you're just going to be writing kind of a basic Encyclopedia Britannica, article as opposed to a research assignment. Then you have something really focused, and that's fantastic. One of my students came in the other day with the idea of wanting to write about the Underground Railroad. That's a massive topic, but it's a good one. The Underground Railroad, of course, being an illegal network of supporters who wanted to help end slavery, but they couldn't do it because, of course, the whole country supported slavery. So the way that they, as far as legally goes, right before the Civil War, so the way that these folks did it was their resistance was to help help slaves escape slavery and send them through a network of kind of hidden homes and cabins and caves and tunnels until they made it far enough up into the north that they can get a fake ID made, new name, all that stuff, and basically hopefully be hidden from the hunters that went out to go try to find escaped slaves and bring them back to their masters. And it's a big topic, right? So what we finally did is that when we looked at the sources available, we noticed that there are a lot of sources that talk about the Underground Railroad as it started in the various states where that were kind of border states to the slave states. So there were different groups that started did their own versions of underground railroads that we talk about as kind of a whole when we say the Underground Railroad, but that's not how it worked. It was all these different resistance movements. So there was one version of the Underground Railroad in Ohio, and another in Pennsylvania, and another in Missouri, and another in Iowa, and another in Indiana, and another in Pennsylvania, all these things, right? And so what the student's going to do is they're going to look at the different using the easily available sources. That is, that student is going to look at several of the different Underground Railroad efforts from the various states that started as part of the research project. In fact, that's their entire research project. That's focused, right? Early days of the Underground Railroad, comparison between these different state movements. Boom. Yeah, right. It's that simple. That's all you have to do, and that's easy. Whereas doing the entire Underground Railroad is really hard to do because there's so much you'll just get lost trying to figure it out, right? So the more narrow, the better. And if you don't know how to do that, you're having trouble. That it does take time and effort to figure that out. Meaning just experience. Please come see me. This is what I do. I like to help with this stuff. So just come see me in my office or during online office hours, whichever's better, and I'll be happy to help take an idea and narrow it down for you. So you have the A range if it's a good kind of focused topic that you could actually get some good resources on and give some real data about. Right, that's fantastic. Right. Once we start to get to the BC range, if you will, when it becomes more of a broad topic and there's not really good sources for it because the topic's just so broad and it's basically just, again, kind of like a light encyclopedia article that doesn't really tell us anything. Then it starts to get into the BC range because it's leaving the avenue of research and becoming just kind of a like a Facebook post about something, And then D and F is if there's really nothing at all. It's just a couple sources, and they're very vague. Maybe they're Wikipedia or something, right? A website, nothing academic, and it's like no effort was put into finding a good topic and narrowing it down and finding research for it. So it's no longer an academically viable project. Citations should be in MLA or Chicago format. If you're going into the field of history, Chicago format is where you live, but otherwise you're probably MLA. And it's only if you're going into, say, psychology and all that you start using APA, and that doesn't work as well for this sort of thing for social sciences. So we go MLA or Chicago. If you're using the journals, which I hope you are, the journals and the other databases through OCC, that's kind of a requirement anyway for this. If you're using those, then they already have the citations made for you. So this is easy. You're done, right? If you find some other sources, and maybe I've approved with you a certain website or some physical document or even a video, then doing the citation correctly is very important. And the way to do that is if you don't already know how to do this, you just haven't had those classes yet that teach you how, those writing classes or what have you, you can literally Google, right? Let's say you found a newspaper article and the newspaper is about the Underground Railroad and it was written back in 1842. I don't know, right? Whatever it is. And you really want to use it and it just works for you. Well, then what you do is how to cite a newspaper. You just type that, right? You just ask Google, it'll take care of it for you. The internet's very useful for these things. So, for instance, how to cite a newspaper article MLA, right? And AI Overview actually kind of does it for you. But if you really want to, because there's lots of key points, right? So this is actually fine. This is a good use of AI, by the way. It just kind of scrapes the relevant info from the web and puts it out for you. This is great. Example citation of a print article, right? If citing an online article, you have to do this. If you want more, and there's great example citations here, right? You can go down to the MLA citation guide that's put out by the University of Nevada. There's another one that's put out by Purdue University, and there's more as you go, right? Salem State University, all these colleges, except for ours, has a great citation guide, and you can just use the formula there, but just do a little background work and find out what the formula is. And it's a fairly specific formula, right? Just make sure that if you're doing a digital article or book or journal, that you're not, or even a website, right? That you're not setting it up as a print piece, that it's an actual physical book or a physical journal or a physical newspaper, because then I'm going to expect you to be able to show that to me at some point, because that's very rare, right? But if you're getting it from an online source, then of course, you're going to cite it as an online source, and that requires more information. So go and find the information for that. Just Google it or go to the Writing Center here at OCC and ask them how to do it. They will show you. You can show them your source and they'll tell you what to do. Right? You just do that. And ultimately, take those writing classes. Those are very, very important for knowing how to do this stuff. And so you got an A if you do it right. B and C on this level if they're there and they're okay, but they're not formatted right because you just didn't do the work right, or there's no citation at all, or they're missing a bunch of parts, or the citation is made up. More about that later. Writing. Evaluates the authority, the background, really introduces the source and then gets into the data that the source gives that relates to the topic, right? It should be written in a way that's readable, that does not have a bunch of grammatical mistakes. Do just a little bit of editing. Use the Writing Center or BrainFuse on Canvas, which is another form of Writing Center. Goes to real humans, right? Do not use Grammarly to do this for you. You can use Grammarly to give you ideas, but then you should physically make the changes that you think are legitimate. Don't let a computer do this work for you, because then it's no longer your work, it's the computer's work. And if the computer work changes too much, I cannot accept your assignment. There's more on that later as well, right? So some grammatical mistakes might bring your score in this section down a little bit. Poorly written, unclear, no organization, was probably written 5 minutes before the thing was due. That's where you really get the low scores, right? And then reliability, use of journals, right? Use of academically proven sources, not trying to throw in some websites where we have no authors and no one's taking claim for it, or Wikipedia, which is fine for standard use, but there's nobody taking responsibility for it. You know what I mean? So those things have to be done well. And so use the rubric to get help. See me in office hours if you need to. See the Writing Center if it would help with editing, and you're going to do fine. Thanks. Recently, AI has become a more available tool to people, and AI can be very useful, but when it's used well. But if it's not used well, it can be very unuseful and result in things like accusations of fraud and people getting fired from jobs and people getting kicked out of schools. And that's very true in this case, too. And I want to show you a couple examples of that. Constitutes poor quality work. In this case, a student submitted a paper, an essay, where AI was used, and then the student did some kind of editing here and there to try to make it seem less like a computer wrote it. But because the student had not really looked up the information, him or herself, the student didn't really know what to put in to make it make more sense. So the focus on this essay was the development, mechanics, and overall success of the Hunley, which is a Civil War submarine, along with the impact the mission had on naval warfare and the legacy the submarine has left. First of all, this is a very broad topic. It's massive and would require a book to do all this, right? A topic for our class would be great for the mechanics of the Hunley. How did it work? That's enough, all on its own. Or the development of it. That's enough, all on its own, right? You want to keep real focus, but this is like this, we're going to write something that will make a novel one day, and that's obviously a bit much, right? When we go down then, really what stands out, I'm not going to go through like the grammar and all that, but what stands out is that then we have these sources. Brady, students can cite this way, like how do I know when you're writing what source you're referring to? You can do it like this, you could also do it where you just say according to this source. I'll show you that in a different paper or a different work, right? But you just have to refer back to the source so we know what you're talking about. That's fine. That's just normal citing. And so this student put in Brady 2004. And then later on put in Rector 2002. So it shows two sources. Okay. And we go down and we got Holmes 2005. All right. So it looks like the student used 3 sources, which is the minimum, right? So, okay, cool. It has all this information that's here where it goes on and on and on. There's some word use errors and some problems, but it's not the worst, right? It's also it's way too broad. So it's kind of vague, but whatever. Anyway, we go down and look at a bibliography, and what we find then is Brady, the Hunley, The Secret of the Confederate Submarine. I'm going to mention something. This doesn't exist. Either AI made it up or the student made it up because they did not do their own research. There's tons of journals in JSTOR about the Hunley. This would have been easy to do, but the student decided not to. The student decided just to let AI, which we found out later, write this thing, and then they just made up sources to make it fit the needs of the assignment. Secrets of a Civil War Submarine is the closest thing to this title. The Secret of the Confederate Submarine. This is not a great title. Anyway, it's not that literate. It's kind of a weird one where somebody's kind of like, oh, this sounds like a good title, but it doesn't exist. What also is here is that this is not cited correctly. This is not MLA or Chicago, and it doesn't include all the information needed for this to work. So the student just put in like a endnote piece here, and then made up a title, and then made up New York HarperCollins, and there's a whole bunch of stuff missing. The one thing though is that if a citation is even close to this, if this was close to right, it would mean that this was from a print source that the student had in their hands, that they actually went and found at a library or bought off Amazon or something, which would have been impossible because it doesn't exist. The Art of War from Holmes, AXA of War, The Behavior of Men in Battle. This is about people in the Vietnam War. has nothing to do with a Civil War submarine. This one actually does exist. So the student randomly grabbed this title, but it's not it's not appropriate to the topic. So obviously the student didn't read it. It's also hard to get, so I don't know where the student would have gotten it. Now let's see what else is here. Oh, the submarine and the sea, naval warfare in the 19th century, also made up. Does not exist. So this is fraud, right? This is gross fraud. This is cause for getting fired from a job, and it's happened. This is cause for getting expelled from your college. This has happened. Here at OCC, we haven't created all the rules yet that will be quite as online with the university level, which takes a dim view to this kind of horrible writing and laziness, but and fraud, right? But this was not a hard assignment, and the one that you guys have is not that hard either. Narrowing the topic down and finding sources can take time and work, and please use my office hours for that. I love to help with that. But otherwise, if you're having trouble, this is not the way to go. All right, it's better to turn in nothing and just take that huge hit than to turn in this, because then you lose all credibility on its campus, and the academic disciplinary board will have to talk to you, and it's going to become a big deal, and it may end up on your transcript that you basically commit fraud academically. That's not going to go well, and you're definitely getting a 0, and I might even drop you from the class because this wastes my time. Right? This is horrible. Another one that's similar to this, because again, we're getting so many of these lately, is something like this. The reality and myth of Paul Revere's Ride at Midnight. Great topic, kind of. Maybe some editing would help, like maybe a capital R, because this is a title. So that's where we go back to the assignment parameters, right? Those assignment parameters matter. Editing matters, right? In the history of America, only countable stories are as iconic. I don't know what that means. Again, this was done by AI, and then I think the student just didn't spend much time on it. So only countable stories are so it starts with the sentence that actually doesn't make sense in English, right? I don't know what that means. Only countable stories. You say countless stories, or I don't know. I have no idea, again, what it means. I'm trying to figure it out. And then it goes on and on and on. I had a number of people last semester in one class do Paul Revere, and each of the essays was almost the exact same. So that's, kind of like, okay, this one's the same basic stuff as the other one. They all pick different sources, though. So we've got historian David Hackett Fisher, cited right here, Fisher 50. That's kind of, and then the student went on and started doing this stuff where I don't know if AI did it or they did it, but started putting sources in footnotes. Usually you don't do footnotes, and your assignment does not require these, but it's nice if you know how to do them, I guess, but yours doesn't require it. You have footnotes and also in-paper citations. You don't do them both together. That's weird, but it's just kind of shotgunned in there, and then goes on and on and on. So we've got Fisher 50. So somebody named Fisher, David Hackett Fisher. Then we've got a source from a guy named Richard Beeman. And then we've got, as we go down, and kind of poorly written, doesn't make a lot of sense because AI wrote it, and AI doesn't know what humans sound like because it's not a human. Let's see, again, Richard Beeman down here. Then a guy named Jonathan Israel, Revolutionary Ideas in Intellectual History of the French Revolution for the Rights of Man to Robespierre. Fantastic. We go down, and it keeps going, right? What's fun about this is when I go to this was an essay. So when I go to their bibliography, which will be at the end, the one guy, Hackett, what was his name? Hackett Fisher, David Hackett Fisher. Guess what doesn't show up in the bibliography? Because AI put that one in there for the student, and it wasn't real because AI makes this stuff up. And so the student went in and put their own sources in because, of course, they needed to make it look like a real thing. I had so many of these, you guys. I failed so many students last semester, more than ever in my whole career. I failed. Beeman Richard, Plain Honest Men, The Making of the American Constitution. I've been a historian for nearly 20 years. Guess what? I own thousands of dollars worth of books, and I have access to a lot more as a professional. Okay, I'll tell you what, this is a real book. The student says because of the way they cited it, and these are accurate citations, but the way the student cited it is that they have the actual book. I have the book too, and as it turns out, the information that the student cited is not in that book. And also, this is about the Constitution. It's not about Paul Revere. and Paul Revere is not mentioned anywhere in this book. Eric Foner, who's a famous writer of history, Gateway to Freedom, the Hidden History of the Underground Railroad. Guess what? It's not about Paul Revere, the hidden history of the Underground Railroad leading to the Civil War. No, sir. So I have that too. I've got that sitting over here next to me on my desk. Right here, Revolutionary Ideas on an Intellectual History of the French Revolution, from the Rights of Man to Robespierre. Guess what? Paul Revere's not in there either. He was not a writer. He was a newspaper guy, but he certainly wasn't doing philosophy. So nice work there, student. And then over here, Henry Longfellow, a guy that wrote a poem about Paul Revere. Paul Revere's right, and then this was sort of cited as if it was an online journal. But the student who gave this to me in December of 2024 said that he accessed it in 2023. Wow, how did he know a year ahead of time that he was going to need that source? Whoops, that's an editing problem. All right, so basically, don't do this. This is another version of gross fraud. This student spent more time making this crap up than actually writing the essay or doing the research. And the research is super hard to, the research on Paul Revere, I could have done this on JSTOR. I could have found the sources that would apply to Paul Revere and written a good essay in probably 45 minutes, the whole thing. That's a very specific topic, yeah, right? So it's not hard. So this student did a lot of work to get an F. And it's just really hard work. Let me show you a draft that I got the other day that is fantastic. It's a good start. This is for an abstract, like what you guys are doing. I blocked a bunch of it out because it's a student's work and they're still working on it, you know. So History 170. Here's the title. The class info and the date. That's great. And then there's a topic: the success of the Union spies and Confederate shortcomings in the Civil War. That's a working title. I have a feeling the student's probably going to update that later. And then gave me a good focus statement during the Civil War. Look at this; it's spelled right. The Union and Confederates both utilized spies, and it gives us some info about what this is about. And we've got our three sources, and these are done not as print sources, but as JSTOR sources. And these, of course, are probably provided by JSTOR, right? That's right on the article. So that made that easy for the student. It does it all for you when you go to the right place. Fantastic. And then the student just pulled the info out of each of these sources that helped with their narrative. How do they do it? They didn't do endnotes or footnotes. They just said, according to the American Intelligence Journals, blah, 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 and then gave me the info from that journal in this paragraph. That's all that's needed. That's fine. Right? No problem. Went down and did the same thing here, pulled out info from another source and just told me what source is from. Went down here, told me what source is from. We kept going and then finished with a decent conclusion somewhere down here. Right there, right? Where it kind of goes, although both Confederates and the Union, blah, 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 well-established networks, and it goes on. So it did just fine, you know. This is a good draft and the student's almost done and they did a great job, and this is good formatting, and it's written well. They passed it through not a Grammarly, which changes the paper and puts in weird computer algorithm words and stuff that don't always make sense, but they took it to the writing center for a review, right? That sort of thing is fantastic. And so this is what you want, right? This will work fine. Don't use AI. Don't use Grammarly unless you're using it to just give you ideas for what you can personally type in and change. That's fine. But do the work yourself and you'll do just fine. Even if you do poor quality work yourself, at least you're going to get a baseline grade. Please don't rely on AI for any of this stuff. It's just going to cause you a lot of grief in the end. Okay. Hopefully that helps to give you some models of what to do and what not to do and where to look for the rubric and all that. And if you have questions, come see me. Bye.